They liked the balance that they had in race.
Casey Kane, we congratulate him, his third career pole.
It's all three Hendrick Motorsports in the front.
There's a few movers and shakers out there. Right?
Carl Edwards free falling for a couple of victory lane is Joey Logano.
Get the inside line on who's fast and who's last before setting your NASCAR fantasy race team lineup this weekend. This is the Inside Line on MRN.com. Presented by Hercules Tires. Now, here are your fantasy experts, Robbie Mays and Tyler Burnett.
Welcome to this week's version of the Inside Line Fantasy Racing Show. This is Robbie Mays. I'm Tyler Burnett, and we are here to talk fantasy racing as we do each and every weekend. Robbie Mays, Charlotte was, first off, rainy and wet on Saturday, but we raced on Sunday, and it was a pretty good race.
And both of us have colds after last weekend, too.
Yeah. Well, because I decided to go to Raleigh and stand in a hurricane to watch a football game.
Let me tell you, that was a fun game to watch from my couch in Charlotte.
With the beer in your hand and everything else. Yeah. No, but I thought Sunday's race was pretty good. Jimmy Johnson and Hendrick Motorsports showed some speed that I didn't know they had over the last 5 or 6 weeks, but they're there. Casey Kane was even fast. I mean, Chase Elliott led a lot of laps.
Yeah.
Hendrick Motorsports, are they back right now?
I think that they are on the cusp of being back. I think they still have a few kinks to work out. But if you look at what Jimmy Johnson's done over the last 2 or 3 weeks, even going back to as far as maybe Richmond, they have been consistently in the top 10. They haven't had the finishes to show for it. But if you look at Jimmy Johnson, his last 3 finishes, obviously the win at Charlotte Motor Speedway, go back to Dover, and then New Hampshire, 3 straight top 10s, which is tied for the most number of top 10s in a row for Jimmy Johnson in 2016. And I'll go ahead and spoil one of my stats from later on today. If Jimmy Johnson finishes in the top 10 in the remaining 6 races this year, he would have 19 top 10 finishes in the season, which would be the lowest total of his career. He has 20 in 2003 and 2014.
Wow.
So it's a down year for Jimmy Johnson, but I think right now they're showing, you know what, we're back.
Well, right now they've set themselves up to go to some pretty good racetracks that they're good at here in the next round and potentially move on to Homestead, which he's never won at Homestead. That's one of how many tracks he's never won at? Is that the only one?
Homestead, Kentucky. He's never won at Kentucky.
So maybe those 2, and that's about it.
Yeah.
But Jimmy Johnson still runs well there. He just has never won there. So
well, he's never had to run well there.
Yeah.
You know, in the past, it's always been he's gone down there and he's contending for championships, and basically all he had to do was run in top 5, and he would win the championship. So, but yeah, every track we go to, and Kansas this weekend is a great example. 3 wins at Kansas Speedway in his career. Talladega, he's won there, and then, Martinsville's coming up in a couple of weeks where he's won there a few times too.
Yeah. Big problems for some chasers. We'll talk about those after the break. We had 5 chase contenders, race contenders, championship contenders that did not finish higher than 30th at Charlotte. We'll talk about that. Could be good fantasy implications moving forward. This is the Inside Line Fantasy Racing Show presented by Hercules Tires.
We'll be right back in just a moment to talk more fantasy racing with Tyler and Robbie here on the Inside Line.
O'Reilly. If your vehicle has a bumpy ride, it might be time for new shocks or struts. Right now at O'Reilly Auto Parts, buy 4 Monroe shocks and struts for the price of 3 after mail-in rebate. Improve your vehicle's steering, stopping, and stability with Monroe shocks and struts at O'Reilly Auto Parts. Better parts, better prices every day. Restrictions apply. See store for details.
O'Reilly Auto Parts.
When the smoke settles, the entertainment never stops.
I feel like experience kind of outweighs youth.
On race weekends, your favorite NASCAR personality is an everyday superhero.
Kyle Busch driving for his life right now.
But when they leave the racetrack, they're just like everyone else.
Our lives are so much different than what people may think they are.
I'm Susie Armstrong. Join me on a daily journey as we discuss the hot topics and engaging personalities of NASCAR Nation. Ned Jarrett's World of Racing, weekdays on the Motor Racing Network.
Race fans, you know there's nothing like the power, excitement, and sounds of NASCAR. Ever wonder what it would be like to strap yourself in the seat of an authentic NASCAR race car? You can do it at the Richard Petty Driving Experience. Ride along or drive yourself at one of 15 tracks nationwide. Call 1-800-237-3889 or visit online at drivepetty.com. Richard Petty Driving Experience. It's authentic NASCAR entertainment. Call 1-800-237-3889 or visit drivepetty.com to reserve your experience.
Now it's back to Robbie Mays and Tyler Burnett on the Inside Line.
The first practice of the weekend, Sprint Cup Series practice, will be coming up here shortly at 1 p.m. Eastern Time. That's 12 local in Kansas. You'll get your first look at who's going to be fast this weekend, who potentially is going to, be ready to win the race on Sunday, which will go live on Sunday at 1 p.m. Eastern Time with MRN's coverage of NASCAR Live Race Day. A little bit of a teaser, Jimmie Johnson, Martin Truex Jr. will be on the show. Kim Kuhn will talk to Martin Truex Jr. and Kyle Rickey will talk to Jimmie Johnson. So those are some teasers heading into race day on Sunday. So let's talk about the Hollywood Casino 400 that will start on Sunday. Robbie Mays, we teased a little bit going into the break that there are 5 who were in a little bit of trouble last week at Charlotte, not making it out of the 30th place finish. And one of those guys is Kevin Harvick, who in the past, he is no stranger to this situation, having to win a race in either the middle of the round or the end of the round to move on.
And he's never been eliminated. Since we went to the elimination format in 2014, he has never been eliminated. He's always found a way to make it to Homestead. And I think this team, they've had their struggles throughout the course of the year. I think, obviously, last weekend, a mechanical problem, you can't control that. I think Kansas this weekend is a good opportunity for them to get back on track. Obviously, they need to go to Kansas thinking that they need to win the race. Right now, they're 8 points behind the cutoff line as far as making the round of 8 coming up here in a couple of weeks. But I think they have to go to Kansas this weekend and try to win.
Yeah, they can't expect to have other people have problems. I mean, and it just seems for some reason, like I said, Kevin Harvick in a must-win situation has always done it. I mean, he just seems like he wants the pressure on him. We saw it in Phoenix in 2014 to move on and win the championship. We saw it in Dover last year after a crash at Chicago and a not-so-great finish at Loudon. And then we saw it this year when he needed to finish. He finished 20th at Chicago. He needed a great finish to move on. He rebounded and he won at Loudon, which Loudon really hasn't been his best racetrack either. So I think Kevin Harvick rebounds this week. I don't know if he wins, but he's going to be hungry after a 30th place finish at Charlotte. Kevin Harvick is on my team for that reason. I think he's good in pressure situations.
Yeah, and he's led a lot of laps in his career at Kansas Speedway, so he's definitely going to be a good choice this weekend. I don't have him on my team, though. I'm putting Martin Truex Jr. back on my team this week. He was 14th in the springtime, but that did not tell the tale of Martin Truex Jr. at Kansas Speedway back in May. Led 172 laps, only to have a loose wheel and a late pit stop at that race, take him out of contention to win. I still think that Martin Truex, even though they struggled at Charlotte Motor Speedway last week, finished 13th, I still think they're probably the best car in the garage right now.
Truex has led 172 laps at Kansas in the spring. He had a problem on pit road, like you said. He also led 95 laps in the spring of 2015 as well. So this is a really good racetrack for him. The finishes just haven't been there for Truex, but Truex is going to be added on my team as well this week.
Yeah, I definitely like Martin Truex again, and I'm going back to Jimmie Johnson again because I think right now they're not great, but they're not bad. It's still Jimmie Johnson. It's still the chase. It's still those guys know what to do. They went to victory lane last week. So I've got Jimmie Johnson again, 9.1 average finish on the mile and a half so far in 2016. That's sixth highest. And at Kansas, he's won here 3 times. So I like Jimmie Johnson this weekend again, too.
Yeah, Jimmie Johnson is a guy who I definitely would think about this week. I have him in my notes. Showed tons of speed last week, and we talked about it at the opening of the show. Mile-and-a-half racetracks have been their forte for a long time. I mean, they won championships. That's the reason why, is because they've been so good at mile-and-a-half racetracks. Well, this year, they have somewhat struggled. They won in the spring of 2015 at Kansas, which you can look at that. He only has finished twice in the last 5 years, not in the top 10. So 8 races he's been in the top 10 out of the last 5 years, and that's pretty impressive from Jimmie Johnson. So he's on my team as well. Or not, he's not on my team. He's on your team.
Yeah.
but Kyle Busch is on my team. So we're trying to throw some numbers out here for you. And I don't think you have Kyle Busch, and we'll get that input from you in a second. But this is the way I look at it with Kyle Busch. He has 3 straight top 5s in Kansas. His first one at the track earlier this year, he was actually pretty good at Charlotte. He got some damage last week, fixed it, finished 6th respectively. It seems like Kyle Busch has gone away from the Hail Mary passes and has gone more consistent finishes, and that's why he won a championship last year, is the consistency. He's matured. Kyle Busch, I think, is a guy who comes out here, gets you a solid top 10. I think he can run in the top 5, potentially win the race. But I think he can get you a solid top 10 this weekend pretty easily.
Well, he threw the Hail Mary at Homestead last year because he needed to. For some reason, Kyle Busch at Kansas, it scares me. And I know he's turned things around. He obviously won here in the springtime. But so many bad things have happened here over the years for Kyle Busch. I'm kind of gun-shy to put him on my team this week.
Well, were you gun-shy the last time we were there?
Yeah.
And did you start him?
No.
You made a mistake.
I know.
Okay.
I made a lot of mistakes. I sat down next to you today.
No, but look, I think Kyle Busch isn't as good as they were when they went to Kansas the last time. I mean, they were great earlier in the year. And 3 weeks ago, you would say Toyota was the best manufacturer in the garage. I mean, they were the best cars.
Yeah.
Right now, it's either Toyotas are backing up or the Chevys are getting better. It seems like it's even. It's more even right now than it was 3 weeks ago. Do you agree?
I think everybody obviously Toyota was out front, and now I think Chevrolet is starting to catch them in the Fords a little bit too. And it's not just in the Sprint Cup Series. Look at the Xfinity Series. Yeah. Joe Gibbs is not as dominant there either. So I think finally that we've talked about this all year, who is going to be able to catch the Gibbs cars. Obviously, it's been Jimmy Johnson the last couple of weeks, but I'm not putting Kyle on my team. I do have Joey Logano on my team, who won the last 2 fall races at Kansas Speedway. Got a little bit of insider information this week. Some folks think that Joey Logano might be a good pick this weekend at Kansas Speedway.
Who's the insider information?
Might be a spotter for his teammate Brad Keselowski, who told me that Joey might be a good pick this weekend.
Well, and one of the stats I had on Joey Logano is he has led a lap at Kansas in the last 4 races. He's the only driver to do that.
Yeah.
Out of the entire field of the NASCAR Sprint Cup Series. Joey's good at Kansas. Let's face it. I mean, he has 2 wins in the last 4 years. And, of course, we had a year ago the run-in with Matt Kenseth that will probably be heavily talked about this week.
Possibly.
And then he had his win, what was that, 2 years ago now, also at Kansas. So, look, this is one of his best racetracks, and he'll probably tell you it's his best racetrack. Joey Logano is going to be solid this weekend, and I like the pick, but I just think that right now, Truex, Kyle Busch, Kevin Harvick, Jimmy Johnson, those guys are just faster right now than Joey Logano.
Yeah, well, we'll see what happens this weekend.
All right, so that's your top 3, Truex, Johnson, Logano. How else does your team round out?
I've also got Ricky Stenhouse at $15. He was 13th in the last 2 races at Kansas Speedway, and still going to hold on to Chris Buescher. He was 16th last week at Charlotte, 13th highest in fantasy points. So he's possibly a pretty good bet again this weekend.
There was some pretty good runs from some of those guys. I mean, Michael McDowell finished 14th last week, which was an impressive run. Chris Buescher was 16th. The guy we're getting ready to talk to finished 21st, which is a pretty good run for Regan Smith. I also have Chris Buescher on my team, and then I have Matt DiBenedetto. I just can't afford Ricky. I had to drop him. I mean, I had him at $14.75.
Yeah.
I liked where I had him. He was 75 cents cheaper. But Ricky Stenhouse Jr., I had to drop to add Truex and Kyle Busch and Kevin Harvick, of course, to afford all 3 of those. So those are our teams. Regan Smith after the break. You're watching the Inside Line Fantasy Racing Show presented by Hercules Tires.
The Inside Line will return in just a moment.
O'Reilly.
A dead battery can leave you stranded, so get yours tested for free during Superstart Battery Month at O'Reilly Auto Parts. Need a replacement? Purchase a Superstart Extreme or Superstart Platinum battery and get up to $25 in O'Reilly gift cards after a mail-in rebate. O'Reilly Auto Parts. Better prices every day. Limits apply. See store for details.
O'Reilly Auto Parts.
Motor Racing Network has a way for you to reach out and express your thoughts and opinions on NASCAR. It's the MRN Fan Forum Hotline.
Just wondering, what's the first thing you tend to
I was curious about those new rules from what I heard.
Call in 844-4-ASK-MRN. Got a question or comment for a driver or MRN personality? 844-4-ASK-MRN.
You guys keep it on. Let's see you guys next
It's
weekend.
the Fan Forum Hotline, your connection to the sport of NASCAR.
Live sports are the one true reality entertainment, where a single dramatic moment can become timeless. In NASCAR, Motor Racing Network's live broadcast elevates your senses to the sights, sounds, and struggles taking place on the racetrack.
One final lap in the Daytona 500. Joey Logano has the point. Junior crosses over.
The power of radio to the imagination of the listener. Tune in to the Motor Racing Network. Visit MRN.com for an affiliate list in your local area.
Welcome back to the Inside Line. Here are your hosts, Robbie Mays and Tyler Burnett.
Again, Sprint Cup Series practice coming up here shortly at 1 p.m. Eastern Time, 12 local if you're in the Kansas area and you're enjoying the races this weekend at the Kansas Speedway. This guy will also be racing this weekend, driver of the Fire Alarm Services Incorporated Chevrolet for Tommy Baldwin Racing. It's Regan Smith joining us on the program. Regan, we haven't talked to you for a while now. First off, how is baby Eliza doing? She's almost a month old now, right?
Yeah, growing up quick and definitely starting to get a little more consistent on a sleep pattern. So mom and dad are pretty happy about that, and just enjoying having two kids now. It's been pretty cool couple weeks here.
That's so awesome. You finished 21st last week at Charlotte. A finish that you guys would probably write home about, right?
Yeah, I mean we were pleased with our day. I think naturally there was a couple wrecks that helped us out just a little bit at the end there, but even with the wrecks, we still ran somewhere around that 25th, 26th place position most of the day, and felt pretty good about our car. We struggled in practice with it and rebuilt it overnight, and I know I scored some people some fantasy points based on what I saw, so that was good. I was happy for that.
Yeah, that's good.
Yeah, points are really good, especially late in the season. Regan, once upon a time, all of the mile-and-a-half tracks were dubbed cookie-cutter tracks. We went to a mile-and-a-half track that started the chase at Chicagoland. We were one last week at Charlotte. We're going to another one this weekend at Kansas Speedway. Compare for me the two tracks, Charlotte to Kansas. What's different about them? What do you need to do differently this weekend that you wouldn't have had to do last weekend at Charlotte?
Well, there's quite a bit different about them. I think the first thing that comes to mind is just the texture of the surface and the way that the racetrack is. Charlotte here in the past little bit has really started to get rough again and started to lose some of the grip that it had when they first repaved it. But that's been kind of a new thing happening here in the past, I'd say, year and a half to 2 years that started to show up a little bit. Where the cars run the most is the surface is starting to get just a little bit chewed up, and the bumps are starting to kind of show up a little more than what they once did there. So, I think that's the first thing that jumps out to mind to me. The second thing is actually the way that the race car loads into the banking. Charlotte, you really load the race car hard into the banking and slam it down when you get into the corner. And because of that, you got to run a significantly different setup than what you would run at Kansas. Kansas is a little bit smoother load into the corners and really just has a little bit different feel to how you pick up that banking and what happens when you do pick it up. With that said, both tracks are widening out. We saw Charlotte on old tires. The top was able to work there. I think another difference and another key we can look at this weekend is going to be Kansas. It seems like old tires or new tires, the top's going to work, and it's going to be warm there. It's supposed to be 80 degrees. The sun will be out. That means the top's going to be even more important than what it otherwise might have been.
Yeah, one of the things that we like having you on for, Regan, is because not only do you play fantasy racing, but you're in the garage, you're racing against these guys, and that's really cool to have a perspective like that on this show. The one thing I wanted to ask you, and we kind of talked about it in the last segment, whereas Hendrick Motorsports showed a lot of speed last week, and it seems like they're closing in on Toyota right now, but in your perspective, who's being talked about the most in the garage as probably the heavy favorite to win the championship right now?
Well, I mean, I guess if you just go based on last weekend, a lot of people are talking Jimmy Johnson and that he could be that guy to, kind of shake up the whole ranks of who everybody thought the favorites were going into Charlotte there, and the way that he performed. You really have to look at all the Hendrick cars, which only two of them are in the chase. But if you look at the 24 and the 48, they've been they've been strong, and
Yeah.
they've been strong for 5 or 6 weeks now, dating back to right around Darlington. And the 24 arguably has been the strongest Hendrick car all year long consistently. So certainly they've got their program back going in the right direction, and I don't think that's to anybody's surprise. I think a lot of us figured when chase time rolled around that HMS teams would be certainly getting their things going up towards the front like we are accustomed to seeing those cars. With that said, me personally, and this isn't just garage talk or anything like that, me personally, and I've felt this way since about 6 months ago, and have said so pretty openly, I still feel like the 78 car is the favorite to win the championship this year. I think that the way the tracks line up for them and the way they've been running on a consistent basis, they're hands down the most consistent car when it comes to having speed every week. So I still really think that those guys and the Toyotas in general are the company to beat.
And obviously, Regan, you know firsthand what Furniture Row Racing is capable of. You've been in that car. You've won in that car before. To me, it seems like, once they figured out their problems this year, Martin Truex and Cole Pern in that group, they've just been able to go out there and obviously they've won 3 of the last 6 races. But last weekend at Charlotte, in the same car they dominated with in May, they just struggled to find speed all weekend long. How frustrating is that, knowing that you've got the car that won the last time you were at a certain racetrack, but you get there this time and you just can't do anything with it?
Well, that shows how quick this sport evolves and how quick things can change. We don't know. There's been some rules changes since that May race, and we don't know if that maybe affected certain cars more than others based on what guys were doing. We know there's a lot of gray area stuff that everybody plays in, and it all just depends on which teams that gray area stuff may be affected more, or which cars. That may have been a purpose-built car for the way that the rules were set up in May, and as the rules changed, that car might not have been quite as exact as what they wanted on it. Now, I would assume that it has been updated and changed around at this point, and that it had every one of the things that they needed in it for this past weekend. And quite honestly, it's a little bit of a head scratcher to me that they did struggle some. Now, we say they struggled some, they still ran in the top 5 all day long. So
Yeah.
let's not get too carried away with saying, oh my goodness, put up the white flag, these guys are done. Because they still ran top 5 all day long until they had their problems at the end with the clutch and the accident on the restart. But when you look at Dover and the way that they dominated that Dover race, a lot of times Dover is a direct reflection of how you're going to run at Charlotte, because the loading, believe it or not, is very similar at those 2 tracks, and the cars run a similar setup, as hard as that might be to believe. That's why Dover's always a good, Charlotte in May is a good sign as to who's going to run good at Dover, and vice versa. When we get to the fall, Dover's a good sign of who's going to run good at Charlotte. So we saw that with the 48 car naturally going out and running good in both races. And, I would have expected the 78 to definitely be in contention for the win. And they just had some issues at the end there.
So when you're picking your fantasy team this week, you just mentioned that Dover was a good grade for Charlotte. What are you looking at as far as finishes this year, or are you looking at past finishes when you're picking your fantasy team this week at Kansas?
Well, I'm looking at a lot of things. I'm looking at past finishes. I'm looking at, believe it or not, Chicago, because there's a lot of similarities between the 2 racetracks and how they drive, and 2 tracks that were built basically in the same year. And when we all first went to those tracks, this is no lie, we thought we were driving into the same track over again until you got on the actual racetrack, and Chicago's got the curve in the back straightaway that kind of separates it just a little bit, but they're strikingly similar. I think the guys that ran good at Chicago are going to run good when we get to Kansas, and looking at past races, naturally the Toyotas will probably be pretty good too.
All right, so who do you got on your team then?
This weekend, I got to go with the 78 car. I feel like they're going to have a strong weekend. I think Martin, has run so good on those 1.5 miles, and not to take anything away from him because he's driving well, but I know Cole Pern very well. I've had an opportunity to work with him for a number of years, and we grew up racing together in go-karts. So I got a long history of friendship with him, and I just believe he's that guy right now. He's the Ray Evernham or the Chad Knaus or whoever you want to compare him to. And maybe he'll have his own name here in a couple of years, but I feel that strongly about his ability as a crew chief to get the job done. Outside of that, I want to look at the guys that are sitting basically from about 7th place to 12th place. The pressure's on those guys. They realize that most of those guys have to win a race to get in. There's only one of them that could potentially point their way in. If somebody wins a race that's behind them or right in front of them, then they're not going to be able to point their way in. Their only option to get into this chase right now is to win. I think those guys have the pressure on them. The 2 guys that I think have the speed on the 1.5 miles and have shown that speed pretty regularly would be Chase Elliott and Kevin Harvick, and Harvick being the natural pick that he's won races this year and he's got that championship experience.
Yeah, that's good. That's great. How about a guy who stands in victory lane? We'll say maybe you can stand in victory lane this weekend, but who do you think wins this weekend?
Well, I'm still sticking with the 78. I think that team is strong. I think they win this weekend. That was my original thought when I started this whole studying off here this week and looking into things and trying to figure it all out. So I feel like that 78 car is going to be the team to beat. And unless they make a mistake, I think they'll have the speed to get it done. Outside of that, maybe Harvick, as I said previously, but I'm going with Truex.
All right, Regan, thanks so much for calling in to the show this week. We love having you on, and good luck this weekend.
Hey, guys, I appreciate it. Looking forward to it. This weekend's going to be exciting. I mean, we got a lot going on when it comes to the points now. People wanted that drama. They're going to get that drama now, even though you've got 4 or 5 guys up in the front that maybe can sit on the lead and play it smart and not have to push quite as hard. You got 5 guys that have ultimate pressure going into Kansas now because they don't want to go into Talladega and have to rely on that. So it should be a lot of fun to watch. No question. Great perspective from Regan Smith being on the show this week. Hopefully he has a good run this weekend. He ran well last week at Charlotte, like I mentioned. And one of the things that is kind of cool about Regan is he has a top 10 at Kansas. Right. Do you remember why he finished, or what car he was in, why he finished in the top 10 that day? It was because he was substituting for Dale Earnhardt Jr. in 2012.
When he had this other concussion.
Yeah, and it's similar to the situation that Alex Bowman has this weekend, who Alex ran well last week, could be a potential sleeper. We'll have more sleepers after the break. You're watching the Inside Line Fantasy Racing Show presented by Hercules Tires.
Got a question or opinion about your fantasy lineup? Give us a call at 8444-ASK-MRN, and it may get used on next week's show. The Inside Line will return in a moment.
Whatever you drive, wherever you go, Hercules Tires will get you there, whether you're running on dirt or running a job. Our dependable, high-quality tires are the perfect fit for your needs. For unmatched value, selection, and warranty with industry-leading road hazard protection, there's only one choice: Hercules Tires. To learn more, visit HerculesTire.com or call 800-677-9535. Hercules Tires, right on our strength.
From work life to nightlife, from home to the road, your day can take you anywhere. These fast-paced times call for Wrangler Advanced Comfort jeans. Advanced Comfort is designed to keep up with you, no matter where you go or what you're doing. They're made with 20% stronger denim and 4-way flex technology that moves with you. Wrangler Advanced Comfort. Go anywhere, look great, and be comfortable. Wrangler Advanced Comfort jeans. Try on a pair today.
The grill is hot and the cooler is cold at America's Tailgate Party, NASCAR USA. Join us each weekend as your host and head chef Rob Tanner serves up the hottest hits and country music, and Steve Post drops by with NASCAR news straight from the sport's top garages and shops. We have 2 hours of country music at the speed of sound, getting you ready for NASCAR racing. Rev up your weekend at America's Tailgate Party, NASCAR USA. Let's talk more fantasy racing on The Inside Line. Here's Robbie and Tyler.
Welcome back to the Inside Line Fantasy Racing Show presented by Hercules Tires. I'm Robbie Mays. He is Tyler Burnett. And it's time to play our favorite game of the week, Under a Rock or Tyler.
Do you live your life up under a rock? Or are you Tyler Burnett?
Look at that. He's definitely under a rock. He has no clue. Okay, this week it's a photo of an actor. The character, the person's name, what he's most known for, anything associated
movie or
with
anything?
this person. Anything.
All right.
So let's cue it up and let's play Under a Rock or Tyler. Who is that person? Very famous, early 80s.
Okay.
A movie?
So I don't know his name, but I do know that he was in Karate Kid.
Okay.
And he was the wax on, wax off guy.
He was Mr. Miyagi.
Mr. Miyagi,
Yeah.
yes.
Okay.
yes.
All right.
What's his
give
name?
His name is Pat Morita.
I was never going to get his name.
That's fine, but he was in 1984's The Karate Kid, also starring
Yes.
Ralph Macchio, Elizabeth Shue, and Billy Zabka.
I did know he was in Karate, yes.
Okay.
That's good.
All right. You're creeping back to 500.
Your winner this weekend?
My winner this weekend, Joey Logano.
All right.
Going 22.
Joey Logano.
Yes.
All right. I like the Martin Truex Jr. pick from Regan Smith. I'm going to go a different route. I'm going to go Kevin Harvick. I think in crunch time, Kevin Harvick is probably one of the best to win when he has to win, and I think Kevin Harvick wins this weekend.
Okay.
All right.
All right.
Rango Fowler, how many?
39th.
He was 39th last week.
Yeah.
Rich was like 800 and some out of 1,000. I was like 700 and some out of 1,000.
I was 280 something.
You had Jimmy Johnson.
I did. Rango at Kansas Speedway. Ryan Blaney, Martin Truex Jr., Jimmy Johnson, Joey Logano, Chris Buescher, and his winner is also Joey Logano.
All right. So Rango is pretty solid. I do like the Ryan Blaney pick, and he was part of my sleepers category this week. 3 starts in the Sprint Cup Series at Kansas. 2 of them were top 10s. In fact, he has back-to-back finishes of top 10s with 7th and 5th. Austin Dillon is in my sleeper category as well. Finished 6th at Kansas in the spring. Was pretty good at Charlotte last week. Ultimately ended up in a crash. Casey Kane is just fast right now.
Yeah.
He cost $24. That's a stretch for me. But over the last 8 races, Kane's worst finish is 14th at Michigan.
If you're in a league where it's a certain number of picks per year, Casey Kane is possibly a good choice this weekend at Kansas Speedway, also possibly next week at Talladega.
I also like A.J. Allmendinger. Fast last week at Charlotte until getting caught up in a crash. This team was 8th in the spring, so that'll be good. Sprint Cup Series practice coming up at 1 p.m. Eastern Time. We also have the NASCAR Sprint Cup Series. What's the race called?
Hollywood Casino
Hollywood
400. It's on that piece of paper right there.
1 p.m. Eastern. Tune in for that. This is Robbie Mays. I'm Tyler Burnett. Thanks to Donald Culver doing the graphics this week. Daryl Smith, the producer. We'll talk to you next week here on The Inside Line.
You've been listening to The Inside Line, presented by Hercules Tires. Stream us every Friday on MotorRacingNetwork.com or on the MRN app. The Inside Line is also available on demand at the MRN.com Media Center or download it through iTunes or Stitcher. The Inside Line is a production of the Motor Racing Network.